You wake up in the dead of night, unable to move, your body frozen in place. As you struggle to breathe, a shadowy figure slowly creeps toward your bed, its presence suffocating and malevolent. Is it just a dream, or has something sinister crossed over into your reality? This audiobook plunges you into the terrifying world of sleep paralysis, where the line between nightmare and reality blurs, and your worst fears come to life. Chapter 1. The Twilight Zone of Consciousness. Sleep paralysis is often described as being trapped in the twilight zone of consciousness, caught between waking reality and the depths of an uncontrollable nightmare. This terrifying phenomenon has been experienced by people across the world for centuries, and while science has attempted to explain it, the experience itself is anything but scientific. Victims find themselves fully awake yet completely paralyzed, unable to move a single muscle. What's worse, many of these episodes are accompanied by eerie sensations, shadowy figures standing at the bedside, a crushing weight on the chest, or the spine-chilling feeling of being watched. This is not just a bad dream, it's a waking nightmare. And what makes it truly horrifying is that it's happening in real time, in the very room where the sufferer went to sleep. Sleep paralysis occurs during rapid eye movement sleep, a phase where the brain is most active and dreams are at their most vivid. During this stage, the brainstem sends signals that temporarily paralyze most of the body's muscles. This paralysis is a protective measure to prevent the body from acting out dreams. However, when sleep goes awry, due to sleep disorders, irregular sleep patterns, or even stress, the brain can become alert while the body remains locked in this state of paralysis. This miscommunication between mind and body is what gives rise to the terrifying experiences known as sleep paralysis. Nightmarish realities. What sleep paralysis feels like. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, your eyes darting around the room, but your body is completely immobilized. You try to scream, but no sound escapes your lips. Panic rises, and suddenly, you notice it, something dark and formless standing at the foot of your bed. Your heart pounds, but you can't turn away. The figure looms closer, its presence heavy and suffocating. Every instinct screams for you to fight, to flee, but your body betrays you, locked in place like a living corpse. These sensations are reported by sleep paralysis sufferers worldwide. In fact, the sense of an ominous presence is one of the most common experiences. Some people feel a weight pressing down on their chest, making it hard to breathe. Others describe a buzzing or vibrating sensation that starts in their head and reverberates through their entire body. Many victims hear voices whispering incomprehensible words, feel invisible hands touching them, or see shadowy figures creeping closer and closer. These experiences are not limited to a single culture or belief system. Across the globe, people have reported strikingly similar encounters. A 2016 survey found that nearly 8% of the general population had experienced sleep paralysis at least once in their lifetime, with some cultures interpreting it as a supernatural event. From the old hag to alien abductions, a global phenomenon. In Newfoundland, the phenomenon is known as the old hag. People who suffer from sleep paralysis claim they see a hideous old woman sitting on their chest, cackling as she suffocates them. The Scandinavian folklore calls it mare, an evil creature that sits on the chests of sleepers and causes nightmares. In Nigeria, sleep paralysis is often linked to demonic attacks, while in Japan, the experience is called kanashibari, a term that refers to being bound or tied up, with the cause attributed to vengeful spirits. Interestingly, the cultural context shapes the hallucinations experienced during sleep paralysis. In America, many people who suffer from sleep paralysis report experiences akin to alien abductions. They describe being unable to move, with small, humanoid figures hovering around them or bright lights shining in their eyes. This has led some researchers to speculate that many supposed alien abductions could be explained by sleep paralysis, where the mind's attempt to rationalize the terrifying immobility manifests as extraterrestrial encounters. Despite the cultural differences, the fear and horror are universal. Whether it's an old hag, a shadow person, or an alien, the The sensation of being unable to move while something dreadful closes in on you is a primal fear that cuts across all human experience. Why sleep paralysis feels so real? What makes sleep paralysis so terrifying is how utterly real it feels. This is no ordinary dream. When you experience sleep paralysis, you're not lost in an imaginary world. You are fully awake, aware of your surroundings, and can even see your own room, down to the last detail. Your mind is alert, but your body is frozen. And as the terrifying entities manifest, it becomes impossible to distinguish between reality and hallucination. The explanation lies in the unique state of consciousness during sleep paralysis. During REM sleep, the brain is highly active, but sensory input from the outside world is reduced. When a person wakes up suddenly in the middle of this stage, their brain can enter a state of hyperawareness. This heightened awareness, combined with the inability to move, creates a perfect storm for the mind to conjure up vivid hallucinations. One theory suggests that these hallucinations are the brain's attempt to make sense of the paralysis. When the body is paralyzed and the brain can't move, it panics. This panic triggers the brain's fear center, the amygdala, and in its heightened state, the brain generates visual and auditory hallucinations that match the intense feelings of terror. The result? The shadowy figures, the oppressive weight, and the chilling voices that seem all too real. Historical perspectives on sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis has been recorded for centuries, often intertwined with superstitions and fear of the supernatural. In 1664, Dutch physician Isbrand van Diemerbroek documented the case of a 50-year-old woman who saw a black creature lying upon her chest and held her down. The woman was in such distress that she believed the creature wanted to kill her. Van Diemerbroek's account, one of the earliest medical descriptions of sleep paralysis, mirrors the experiences reported today, centuries later. Even the famous painter Henry Fuseli captured the essence of sleep paralysis in his 1781 masterpiece, The Nightmare. The painting shows a woman draped over her bed, eyes closed, with a demonic creature perched on her chest and a ghostly horse lurking in the background. This image, symbolic of the terror and helplessness felt during sleep paralysis, has become iconic. Over time, scientific studies have sought to explain sleep paralysis, but the terror it instills remains as powerful as ever. When science and reason fail to provide comfort, it's no wonder that people turn to supernatural explanations for what they endure during these waking nightmares. Sleep paralysis may be a natural phenomenon, but for those who suffer from it, each episode is a harrowing descent into the unknown, where the boundaries of reality are blurred and the shadows come alive. Chapter 2. The Dark Visitors. Entities that haunt the paralyzed. Sleep paralysis is frightening enough on its own, a waking nightmare where your body refuses to obey your commands. But what makes it truly horrifying for many is not just the inability to move, but the sinister entities that often accompany it. Those who have experienced sleep paralysis describe these figures in chilling detail. Shadowy forms, malevolent crones, and grinning figures that seem to exist only to torment. These entities are not figments of imagination for the sufferers. They are real, tangible presences that stand at the crossroads of fear and reality. Throughout history and across cultures, reports of these same terrifying beings appear again and again. Here are the most common and disturbing visitors encountered by those trapped in sleep paralysis. The shadow people. Sentinels of fear. Shadow people are, by far, the most commonly reported entities in sleep paralysis experiences. They are faceless silhouettes, darker than darkness itself, often described as human-shaped voids. They stand at the edges of the room or loom over the bed, watching their victims with unseen eyes. One of the earliest documented cases comes from the late 1800s, recorded by a physician named Dr. John S. Adams. He described a patient, a woman in her 40s, who would frequently wake up in the middle of the night to see a tall, featureless figure standing in the corner of her room. The figure never spoke or moved, but its presence was suffocating. It watched her with such intensity that she could feel its gaze, even though it had no eyes. Her body would freeze in terror, and she was convinced it would harm her if she dared to look away. Fast forward to more recent times, and you'll find thousands of similar reports. In 2001, a study conducted by Dr. Al Shane at the University of Waterloo examined sleep paralysis experiences and found that over 70% of people who experienced it reported seeing shadowy figures. These entities would often appear to shift and grow as the paralysis progressed, some even coming close enough to touch or whisper unintelligible words. One notable case comes from a man named Mark, who shared his story on an online forum dedicated to sleep disorders. Mark recounted that he would wake up to find 3 shadowy figures standing at the foot of his bed. The figures would sway back and forth, like a group of dark specters performing some morbid dance. They never spoke, but he could feel them feeding off his fear, as if drawing energy from his terror. He described the sensation as having your soul slowly drained by creatures that have no right to exist. What makes the shadow people so unnerving is that they often appear with no clear shape or form, making them amorphous manifestations of fear itself. Many sufferers believe that these entities are not just hallucinations, but something far more sinister, beings that thrive on the fear of the helpless and the vulnerable. The Old Hag, suffocating in the night. The Old Hag is another frequently reported entity, and she's far more malicious than the shadow people. She appears as a grotesque, wrinkled crone, often sitting on the chest of her victims, crushing them under her weight. Those who have encountered her describe the sensation of suffocation, as if she's deliberately trying to choke the life out of them. One of the earliest references to the Old Hag comes from Newfoundland folklore, where people suffering from sleep paralysis would say, "The hag is riding me." In these cases, the Old Hag was not just a figment of the imagination, but a malevolent spirit that was believed to cause physical harm. Victims would wake up gasping for air, convinced that the hag had left bruises or claw marks on their bodies. A documented case from 1997 features a young woman named Anna, who experienced sleep paralysis almost nightly. Anna reported that she would wake up to find the hag perched on her chest, her leathery hands wrapped around Anna's throat. The Old Hag's face was twisted in a wicked grin, her yellowed teeth glistening in the dim light. Anna felt as though she was being squeezed by an iron grip, unable to breathe, unable to scream. When she finally broke free from the paralysis, the room would be empty, but the feeling of the hag's weight would linger for hours. Another case, detailed in a 2011 sleep study conducted in Denmark, describes a man who claimed to be physically assaulted by the Old Hag. He would wake up with scratch marks on his chest and neck, despite being alone in his locked apartment. The experience left him traumatized, fearful of sleeping in his own home. He moved 3 times in as many years, but the hag followed him wherever he went, appearing night after night until he finally sought psychological help. The Smiling Man, a grin that chills the soul. Perhaps the most disturbing of all is the Smiling Man. This entity has been reported by a smaller number of sleep paralysis sufferers, but those who encounter him describe a level of malevolence that surpasses the other entities. The Smiling Man is often seen standing at the edge of the bed or even sitting beside the victim. He is usually described as a tall, human-shaped figure with a grotesquely exaggerated grin that seems to stretch from ear to ear. In 2013, a case was documented by a researcher named David Hufford, who interviewed a middle-aged man named James. James described the Smiling Man as a shadowy figure, but with one crucial difference: his grin. The figure would lean over James, its mouth slowly widening into a smile that defied the limits of human anatomy. The longer James stared at it, the wider the smile grew, until it seemed as though the Smiling Man's entire face would split open. James reported that he could hear the figure's jaw creaking as it moved, and despite being paralyzed, he could feel his own heartbeat race to the point of near panic. Another account, shared by a woman named Helen, described a similar entity that appeared in her room several nights in a row. The Smiling Man would sit at the edge of her bed, grinning, as if enjoying her terror. His teeth were unnaturally white, and his eyes, 2 hollow pits of darkness, seemed to twinkle with amusement. Each night, he would inch closer, until one night, She woke up to find him lying next to her, whispering her name in a voice that sounded like nails scraping against metal. These entities, shadow people, the old hag, and the smiling man, have been reported countless times across cultures and time periods. Whether they are hallucinations or something far darker, one thing is clear. Those who encounter them are forever haunted by their presence, caught between the terror of paralysis and the dread of what may come next. Chapter 3: Possessed by Sleep. Demonic Encounters and Paranormal Experiences. Sleep paralysis has been surrounded by an aura of supernatural dread for centuries. Before modern science attempted to explain the phenomenon, it was often considered the work of demons, spirits, or malevolent forces. Across cultures and time periods, these experiences were not just seen as hallucinations, but as direct interactions with dark entities. As we delve into the historical and cross-cultural perspectives, it's clear that sleep paralysis, for many, is far more than just a trick of the mind. Historical accounts, demons and spirits in the night. One of the most infamous historical accounts linking sleep paralysis to demonic encounters comes from the 17th century. The Malleus Maleficarum, a medieval treatise on witchcraft, detailed how witches and demons were believed to attack their victims at night, leaving them paralyzed and vulnerable. The treatise described victims waking up to see demons standing at their bedside or lying on top of them, pressing down on their chest and suffocating them. A well-documented case from 1664 involved a 50-year-old Dutch woman who reported being attacked by a demonic entity during her sleep. The account, recorded by Dutch physician Isbrand van Diemerbroek, describes the woman waking up to find a dark creature lying on her chest, holding her down. She struggled to breathe, felt her body go completely limp, and could only stare in horror at the entity that seemed to relish her fear. This incident was so terrifying that it became a reference point in medical texts about night terrors and sleep disorders for years to come. In 1977, Dr. Peter McKellar recorded a case study involving a 22-year-old woman who described a terrifying sleep paralysis episode while attending university in Scotland. The woman reported waking up in the middle of the night, completely paralyzed, to see a figure shrouded in darkness standing at the foot of her bed. The figure began speaking in a low, growling voice that she could not understand, but she felt an overwhelming sense of evil. The experience was so traumatic that she refused to sleep alone for months afterward. Demonic possession or sleep paralysis. The blurred line in cultural interpretations. In the Middle East, sleep paralysis is often attributed to the work of the jinn, supernatural beings that are said to exist alongside humans, but in a different realm. Jinn, according to Islamic mythology, can influence or possess individuals, causing severe distress and fear. One documented account from Saudi Arabia in 2009 involved a man who began experiencing sleep paralysis after he reportedly disturbed a jinn's resting place. During his episodes, he would wake up paralyzed, feeling as if his body was being twisted and torn apart. Local healers who performed ruqya on him reported hearing strange noises and seeing objects move around the room as they recited verses from the Quran. Despite their efforts, the man's experiences persisted, leading to widespread fear in his community. In Newfoundland, Canada, the old hag legend is a prominent part of local folklore. Victims report waking up to see a hideous old woman sitting on their chest, squeezing the life out of them. This phenomenon has been documented in both folklore and scientific studies, such as a 2001 paper published by Drive Al Shane at the University of Waterloo, which investigated the similarities between the old hag experience and sleep paralysis. Dr. Shane's research found that many victims who reported encounters with the old hag felt physical pain and pressure during the episodes, and some even showed marks on their skin afterward. Possession-like symptoms, speaking in tongues, and levitation. Some of the most disturbing cases of sleep paralysis involve symptoms that are more commonly associated with possession. In a 2011 study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine, researchers documented a case where a young woman from Italy would enter a state of paralysis and begin speaking in what sounded like Latin, despite having no knowledge of the language. Witnesses described her voice as deep and guttural, completely unlike her usual tone. During one episode, She reportedly levitated a few inches off her bed, her body arching backward in a way that seemed impossible. Another documented case from Brazil in 2015 involved a man who, during sleep paralysis episodes, would be seen by his family with his eyes open and unblinking, yet unresponsive. His lips would move as if he were speaking, but no sound would come out. After the episode, he would report intense pain in his limbs, as if he had been physically restrained. The man's family brought in multiple priests to bless the house, but the episodes continued for several months before gradually decreasing in intensity. The fear of the unknown. Are these just hallucinations? Despite scientific explanations that link sleep paralysis to the brain's inability to properly transition between sleep and wakefulness, there is a growing body of anecdotal evidence that suggests these experiences may be more than just hallucinations. The fear and dread that accompany these episodes, along with the vividness of the perceived encounters, lead many sufferers to believe that what they're experiencing is not a product of the mind, but an actual visitation from something malevolent. In 2008, the American Journal of Psychiatry published a paper exploring the psychological impact of sleep paralysis on individuals who believed they were being attacked by demons or spirits. The study found that these individuals exhibited higher levels of PTSD-like symptoms compared to those who experienced sleep paralysis without supernatural hallucinations. This finding suggests that, for many, the experience is so traumatic that it leaves a lasting impression on their mental health. Are these terrifying encounters merely tricks of a brain in overdrive? Or do they represent something more sinister, an overlap between the waking world and a darker, unseen realm? It's a question that has haunted humanity for centuries and will likely continue to do so, as each new case of sleep paralysis brings with it a new wave of fear and uncertainty. Chapter 4. The Devil's Hour. Why sleep paralysis strikes at night. There's something inherently terrifying about waking up in the middle of the night, surrounded by darkness and silence, only to find yourself completely paralyzed. You can't move, you can't scream, and you're left alone with whatever horrifying visions decide to make their presence known. For centuries, sleep paralysis has been associated with the supernatural, with many reports claiming it strikes most frequently during what is often called the Devil's Hour, around 3 a.m. This time frame, long believed to be the peak of supernatural activity, is when the boundary between our world and the unknown is said to be thinnest. Witches, demons, and other malevolent entities are believed to be most active at this hour, making it a prime time for sleep paralysis episodes to unfold. The witching hour, the darkest time of night. The association between sleep paralysis and the witching hour is more than just folklore. Many documented cases of sleep paralysis report the episodes occurring consistently between 3 and 4 a.m. This pattern is not just anecdotal. A 2005 study published in Sleep Medicine Reviews revealed that the majority of sleep paralysis episodes happen during this time frame, particularly in those who suffer from it frequently. One such case is that of Teresa Conroy, a London resident who shared her experiences with sleep researchers in 2010. Teresa reported waking up paralyzed at exactly 3:15 a.m. almost every night for several months. Each time, she would hear a low hum, like the sound of a distant generator, and feel a sudden drop in temperature. She described seeing a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of her room. The figure never moved, but its presence was suffocating. Teresa could only watch helplessly as it seemed to stare at her, its outline barely visible against the darkness of the room. When she finally broke free from the paralysis, the figure would vanish, but the fear would linger for hours. This association with 3 a.m. can be traced back to early beliefs that the hour was sacred to malevolent forces. Many cultures believe that the Devil's Hour mocks the hour of Christ's death, making it a time when demons and spirits are most powerful. Those who experience sleep paralysis during this time often describe it as being caught in a struggle between light and darkness, like a tug of war over their soul. The night as a veil between worlds. The nighttime itself plays a significant role in amplifying the terror of sleep paralysis. Darkness, silence, and isolation create the perfect environment for fear to flourish. When the mind is caught between wakefulness and sleep, and the room is shrouded in shadows, the brain's ability to rationalize fades. This is when our deepest fears and anxieties can manifest in terrifying ways. One documented case from the 1980s, reported in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, involved a man in his 30s who would experience sleep paralysis whenever he stayed in his childhood home. He described how the room seemed to come alive during these episodes. The walls would appear to breathe, and the shadows would shift and twist into grotesque forms. He would hear faint whispers and footsteps around his bed. Once, he even felt something cold and wet brush against his face like the tongue of an animal. But when he awoke, there was nothing there. In another well-documented incident from Japan, a woman reported hearing the faint sound of bells during her sleep paralysis episodes, accompanied by a sensation of being watched. Japanese folklore attributes sleep paralysis, or kanashibari, to vengeful spirits that use the cover of night to exact revenge or deliver warnings. The woman reported that every time she heard the bells, she would see the silhouette of a woman at the foot of her bed. One night, she awoke to find a dark, female figure kneeling beside her, its face inches from hers. She could smell its breath, rotting and foul, and hear it whispering her name. The experience left her so shaken that she refused to sleep alone for years. Unexplained noises and poltergeist activity. One aspect that makes sleep paralysis even more terrifying is when it's accompanied by physical sensations or unexplained noises that linger even after the episode ends. Many documented cases describe hearing banging, scratching, or the sound of furniture being moved. These sounds are often reported by others in the household, adding to the mystery of whether these events are purely hallucinatory or something more sinister. In 2003, the American Journal of Psychiatry published a case study of a 40-year-old man who experienced sleep paralysis while staying in an old inn in rural New England. He described waking up at 3 a.m., unable to move, with a crushing sensation on his chest. As he struggled to breathe, he heard a loud, thumping noise coming from inside the walls. Then, the bed began to vibrate. He thought he saw a shadowy figure dart across the room, but it was gone before he could focus on it. The episode lasted only a few minutes, but the sounds continued long after he regained control of his body. The next morning, the innkeeper mentioned that several guests had complained about hearing strange noises during the night. Some even claimed to have seen a spectral figure in the hallway. The inn, built in the 1800s, had a history of ghost sightings, and the room the man stayed in was reputedly haunted. This account, while explained by researchers as a possible overlap of auditory and visual hallucinations, left both the man and the innkeeper deeply unsettled. In another case from 1999, reported in the Journal of Parapsychology, a family in Ohio began experiencing strange occurrences after their daughter started having frequent sleep paralysis episodes. During one particularly intense episode, the girl, age 16, woke up paralyzed at 3:33 a.m. She described seeing a shadowy figure crouching beside her bed, whispering incomprehensible words. As she tried to scream, a loud crash echoed through the house. Her parents, who were awake and in the living room, reported hearing the crash and rushed to her room. They found her gasping for breath, tears streaming down her face, and the heavy dresser beside her bed overturned. The family claimed that objects continued to move on their own for weeks after that night. Books fell off shelves, doors slammed shut, and on several occasions, they heard faint chanting coming from the girl's bedroom when she wasn't home. Paranormal investigators who examined the case couldn't find a rational explanation, but they noted that the activity seemed to coincide with the girl's sleep paralysis episodes, always around 3 a.m. The terror of the night. The fact that sleep paralysis so often strikes in the dead of night, and during the witching hour in particular, makes it feel as if there's more at play than just the brain's inability to fully wake up. The darkness, the silence, and the isolation all contribute to a sense of vulnerability, making each episode feel like a personal attack from the unknown. Whether these experiences are simply the result of a half-awake brain or something far more sinister, the timing of these episodes adds a layer of dread that leaves sufferers, and those who hear their stories, forever haunted by what lurks in the shadows at 3 a.m. Chapter 5. Tales from the Abyss. Unsolved Cases and Paranormal Theories. Sleep paralysis alone is terrifying, but when it intersects with unexplained phenomena, the experience takes on an even more sinister tone. Throughout history, there have been countless documented cases where sleep paralysis has coincided with poltergeist activity, UFO sightings, and even mysterious deaths. These spine-chilling reports blur the line between dream and reality, making it difficult to dismiss them as mere hallucinations. Here, we delve into some of the most unsettling documented cases that leave us questioning whether sleep paralysis is just a neurological glitch or a gateway to something far more sinister. Case 1. The Hutchison Poltergeist and Sleep Paralysis. One of the most baffling cases linking sleep paralysis to paranormal activity is the Hutchison Poltergeist case from Scotland, documented in the 1970s. The Hutchison family reported a series of disturbing events that began with their teenage daughter, Janet, experiencing severe episodes of sleep paralysis. She would wake up paralyzed, unable to move, and sense an invisible presence hovering over her. Shortly after these episodes began, the entire household became plagued by poltergeist-like activity. Objects moved on their own, furniture toppled, and strange knocking sounds reverberated through the house. During one of Janet's sleep paralysis episodes, the family reported seeing a glass of water slide across the table, then shatter against the wall. Investigators, including police officers and local clergy, witnessed these phenomena firsthand and could offer no logical explanation. The disturbances continued for months, always intensifying after one of Janet's episodes. Eventually, the family moved away, but the case remained unsolved, and Janet's sleep paralysis episodes ceased soon after leaving the house. Case 2. The Enfield Haunting and Sleep Paralysis. A more well-known case that intertwines sleep paralysis with poltergeist activity is the Enfield Haunting in London, England, documented extensively in the late 1970s. The Hodgson family, especially the youngest daughter, Janet Hodgson, experienced violent disturbances in their home, which included levitating objects, disembodied voices, and even physical assaults. Janet frequently reported waking up paralyzed, feeling an unseen force pressing down on her chest, rendering her unable to move or scream. On several occasions, she claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the room just before objects flew across the room or doors slammed shut. The case attracted widespread media attention, and several investigators, including Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research, witnessed these strange events. During one particularly harrowing night, Janet woke up from a sleep paralysis episode to find herself suspended midair, as if an invisible hand was holding her up. She screamed, and as her family rushed in, they saw her drop abruptly back onto the bed. The connection between her sleep paralysis and the paranormal events became more apparent over time, but despite the extensive documentation, no scientific explanation has been able to fully debunk the phenomena. The case remains one of the most famous unsolved paranormal cases, blurring the lines between sleep paralysis and demonic possession. Case 3. The Man from Taured and Sleep Paralysis Linked to Disappearance. Sleep paralysis has also been linked to mysterious disappearances. One such unsettling account is the case of the Man from Taured, documented at Haneda Airport in Tokyo in 1954. While the case itself is often filed under urban legend, there is documented evidence of the man's unexplained arrival and sudden disappearance. The man, claiming to be from a country called Taured, presented a passport and documentation that seemed authentic, yet no such country existed. After being detained for further questioning, he was placed in a guarded hotel room overnight. The next morning, the guards found the room empty, with no sign of how he could have escaped from a 15th-floor room with no balcony. What links this strange disappearance to sleep paralysis is the account of a guard who experienced sleep paralysis that night. He reported waking up paralyzed, hearing a buzzing sound, and seeing a flash of bright light. When he regained control of his body, he noticed the time, 3:30 a.m. He believes he may have seen the man vanish in front of him, but dismissed it as a trick of the mind due to his paralysis. The case has since fueled theories about interdimensional travel and the possibility that sleep paralysis allows brief glimpses into other realities. Case 4. Bruises and scratches. Physical marks from sleep paralysis? One of the most disturbing aspects of sleep paralysis is when victims report waking up with physical marks, bruises, scratches, or even bite marks that were not there before the episode. Documented cases of these unexplained injuries have led some researchers to question whether sleep paralysis could be a momentary interaction with malevolent forces. A well-documented case comes from the 1990s, reported in a study by Dr. J. Alan Shane, a pioneer in sleep paralysis research. The study involved a 28-year-old woman who experienced frequent episodes of sleep paralysis accompanied by the sensation of being dragged out of bed. She reported feeling hands gripping her wrists and ankles, and each time, she would wake up with dark bruises around these areas. The bruises were examined and photographed by medical professionals, but no physiological explanation was found. Another case, published in the Journal of Sleep Research in 2002, described a man who reported waking up with deep scratches on his back and neck following a particularly vivid sleep paralysis episode. He claimed to have felt claws raking across his skin as he lay paralyzed, and the injuries matched his description perfectly. Researchers could not determine how the scratches were inflicted, as there were no sharp objects or pets in the room. This case remains one of the most perplexing examples of physical harm during sleep paralysis. Paranormal theories. Glimpses into other dimensions? So what could explain these bizarre phenomena? Some paranormal researchers believe that sleep paralysis may be more than just a sleep disorder. They suggest that during these episodes, the brain is in a heightened state of awareness that allows individuals to perceive entities or energies normally invisible to the human eye. One theory, proposed by parapsychologist Dr. Barry Taff, is that sleep paralysis creates a temporary gateway between our reality and other dimensions. This theory is supported by numerous reports of sleep paralysis sufferers who describe seeing not just shadowy figures, but entire landscapes or scenes that disappear once the paralysis ends. Dr. Taff suggests that these visions could be momentary overlaps of parallel dimensions, offering a brief, terrifying glimpse into worlds we don't understand. Another theory is that sleep paralysis leaves the victim in a vulnerable state that attracts malevolent entities, much like blood in the water attracts sharks. This theory, often put forth by demonologists, posits that entities feed off the fear generated during these episodes, using the victim's paralysis to assert control over them. Unanswered questions. The exact nature of sleep paralysis remains one of the most enigmatic puzzles in both science and the paranormal realm. The cases presented here only scratch the surface of a phenomenon that, for many, defies explanation. Whether these episodes are mere hallucinations or windows into something darker, one thing is certain. Those who have experienced sleep paralysis and its terrifying intersections with the paranormal are forever changed, haunted not just by what they saw, but by the lingering question of what might happen the next time they're unable to move. Chapter 6. Stalked in Sleep. Paranormal encounters that crossed into reality. Sleep paralysis is terrifying enough on its own, being trapped in your body while shadowy figures loom overhead. But what happens when those figures don't vanish when you wake up? Imagine being haunted by the same sinister presence long after the paralysis ends. For some unfortunate souls, sleep paralysis isn't just a nightmarish experience. It's the beginning of a disturbing ordeal that bleeds into their waking lives. Documented cases reveal stories of people being followed by entities first encountered during sleep paralysis, experiencing strange phenomena that defy explanation, and even receiving sinister omens that cast a dark shadow over their lives. Case 1. The Shadow Man Follows, the Case of Heidi Hollis. One of the most chilling documented cases of a sleep paralysis entity crossing into reality is that of Heidi Hollis. Heidi, an author and paranormal researcher, has shared her own terrifying experiences with what she calls the Hat Man, a shadowy figure with a wide-brimmed hat and glowing red eyes. Her encounters began during sleep paralysis episodes in the early 2000s, when she would wake up frozen and see the figure standing by her bed, staring at her with an intensity that seemed to pierce her very soul. What made Heidi's case particularly unsettling was that the Hat Man didn't remain confined to her sleep paralysis episodes. Soon, she began seeing him even when she was fully awake, going about her day. He would appear in reflections, peering at her from windows or dark corners. Others in her family reported seeing him as well, always watching, never speaking. The Hat Man's presence seemed to trigger poltergeist-like activity in their home. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and appliances turned on and off without explanation. Heidi's experience is not unique. Since she began sharing her story, hundreds of people have come forward with their own sightings of the Hat Man, describing eerily similar encounters. The recurring nature of these experiences has led some researchers to theorize that the Hat Man is not just a hallucination, but a real entity capable of crossing into our reality through the vulnerable state induced by sleep paralysis. Case 2. The persistent haunting of Doris Bither. Another documented case where sleep paralysis and paranormal phenomena intersected is the infamous haunting of Doris Bither, which occurred in Culver City, California, in the early 1970s. This case, investigated by Dr. Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor, began with Doris reporting repeated sleep paralysis episodes in which she would feel unseen hands gripping her wrists and ankles, holding her down. However, the situation escalated far beyond sleep paralysis. Doris claimed that during these episodes, she would see 3 shadowy figures standing at the foot of her bed. These figures weren't content to simply watch. They began attacking her physically. Marks and bruises appeared on her body, which she attributed to these dark entities. Even more disturbingly, her children began seeing the same shadowy figures, not only during the night, but in broad daylight. Investigators set up equipment in Doris's home and were able to capture strange phenomena on camera: floating orbs of light, objects moving by themselves, and what appeared to be humanoid shapes manifesting in the middle of the room. Despite the evidence gathered, no concrete explanation was ever found, and the activity persisted long after Doris moved away. Dr. Taff later suggested that Doris's sleep paralysis experiences may have acted as a trigger for the entities to interact more directly with the physical world, making this one of the most well-documented cases where sleep paralysis seemed to open a doorway to an ongoing haunting. Case 3. The terrifying visits of the black-eyed children. Reports of black-eyed children have cropped up sporadically across the globe, and some of the most disturbing encounters begin with sleep paralysis. These entities are described as children, usually between the ages of 6 and 16, with pale skin, black eyes devoid of pupils, and a strange, almost robotic demeanor. Witnesses often report first seeing these children during sleep paralysis episodes, standing at the foot of the bed or just outside the window. One notable case documented in the 1990s involved a man named Brian Bethel, who shared his experience with the black-eyed children in a newspaper column. While his initial encounter did not occur during sleep paralysis, Brian later reported experiencing episodes where he would wake up paralyzed, only to see the same black-eyed children staring at him through his bedroom window. What made his case more terrifying was that these encounters didn't stop when he was awake. One night, as he was watching television, Brian saw the same 2 children standing outside his living room window. He described feeling a sudden wave of dread, and as he looked closer, he noticed their black, empty eyes staring back at him. He immediately felt the same suffocating fear he experienced during his sleep paralysis episodes, and though the children didn't speak or move, their presence seemed to fill the room with a dark energy. Many paranormal researchers believe that the black-eyed children are interdimensional beings who use sleep paralysis to establish a connection with their victims. Once that connection is made, they can manifest physically, making them one of the most feared entities linked to sleep paralysis experiences. Case 4. Sinister Omens and Mysterious Deaths. The Strange Case of Alice Blanchard. In a lesser-known but equally disturbing case, Alice Blanchard, a resident of Birmingham, England, began experiencing sleep paralysis in 2012 after a series of traumatic life events. During these episodes, she would see a dark, cloaked figure standing at the foot of her bed. The figure never moved or spoke, but she sensed a malevolent presence radiating from it. Soon after these episodes began, Alice noticed a series of strange occurrences around her home. clock stopping at exactly 3:03 a.m., light bulbs bursting without warning, and the sudden death of her beloved cat, who appeared to have been frightened to death. Alice reported feeling stalked by this figure, even during the day, often catching glimpses of it out of the corner of her eye. When she confided in her best friend, her friend dismissed it as stress. However, just days later, her friend was involved in a fatal car accident. The last text message she sent to Alice was a photo taken in her living room. In the background, a dark, cloaked figure could be seen standing near the door. Paranormal investigators who reviewed Alice's case were baffled. They found no evidence of tampering with the photo, and the figure's resemblance to what Alice had described during her sleep paralysis episodes was uncanny. The case remains unsolved, and Alice moved away, hoping to escape the entity that seemed determined to follow her wherever she went. What do these entities want? Paranormal investigators' insights. Paranormal investigators who have examined these cases suggest that the entities encountered during sleep paralysis are more than just products of an overactive mind. Some believe these beings are attracted to the fear and helplessness experienced during these episodes, feeding off the victim's energy. Others propose that sleep paralysis might make a person temporarily more perceptive, allowing them to see entities that are usually invisible. The lingering question remains: are these entities merely figments of a frightened brain, or do they have a purpose for stalking their victims in both the dream world and the waking world? For those who've experienced such encounters, the answer isn't always clear. What is certain, however, is that once these entities latch on, they rarely let go, haunting their victims long after sleep paralysis ends and turning their lives into a waking nightmare. Chapter 7. Breaking the Curse. Confronting and overcoming the nightmares. Sleep paralysis can feel like a curse, trapped in your own body, preyed upon by shadowy figures and dark forces. But for many who suffer from it, there is a way to regain control. The battle against these nightmarish experiences has been fought with both scientific and spiritual weapons. While researchers advocate for sleep hygiene and psychological strategies, countless victims have also turned to prayers, charms, and other rituals to ward off the entities that haunt them. Some have shared remarkable stories of success, offering hope that even the darkest of sleep paralysis experiences can be banished for good. Spiritual protection and rituals. A long history of defense. Throughout history, people have used various methods to protect themselves from the entities encountered during sleep paralysis. In many cultures, these experiences are viewed not as a simple sleep disorder, but as a form of spiritual attack. Protective rituals, prayers, and talismans have been used to keep these dark forces at bay. One of the most documented protective rituals is the use of iron. Iron has long been believed to repel malevolent spirits and supernatural entities. Historical records from the American South detail how people experiencing witch riding would place iron nails or horseshoes under their beds to prevent attacks. In many cases, victims reported a decrease in sleep paralysis episodes after employing this tactic. And even when episodes did occur, the malevolent figure seemed unable to approach the bed as closely as before. In Catholic tradition, prayer and holy objects such as crucifixes and rosaries are commonly used to combat demonic presences. Father Gabriel Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist until his death in 2016, documented several cases where sleep paralysis experiences were alleviated or completely stopped after the victims used holy water or kept a blessed crucifix by their bedside. While the scientific community attributes these successes to the power of belief and suggestion, the individuals who lived through these experiences believe it was the spiritual intervention that made the difference. Victims who have confronted the darkness and won. It's not just spiritual rituals that have brought relief. Some victims have successfully confronted the entities they see during sleep paralysis, facing their fears head-on. These stories, documented in various studies and personal testimonies, offer hope to those who feel helpless against the terror of these experiences. One notable case was documented in a 2011 article published in Sleep Research Quarterly. The study followed a woman in her 30s who had been experiencing severe sleep paralysis for over a decade. She frequently saw a dark figure, whom she referred to as the Shadow Man, standing at the foot of her bed during episodes. He would slowly move closer each time, and she was convinced he would harm her if he ever reached her. After years of being paralyzed by fear, she decided to change her approach. One night, when the shadow man appeared, she mentally confronted him, screaming in her mind, "I'm not afraid of you." To her surprise, the figure stopped and slowly receded into the darkness, disappearing completely. From that night on, her sleep paralysis episodes gradually diminished in intensity and frequency. Within 6 months, she was no longer experiencing them at all. The researchers suggested that this shift in her mental approach helped her break free from a psychological cycle of fear and helplessness. But to her, it felt like she had confronted a very real presence and won. The power of belief and intention, a psychological battlefield. Sleep paralysis is as much a battle of the mind as it is a struggle with the body. Many experts believe that the entities encountered during sleep paralysis are manifestations of deep-rooted fears, stress, and anxiety. By altering one's beliefs and intentions, sufferers may be able to reclaim control over these terrifying experiences. Dr. J. Alan Shane, a prominent sleep paralysis researcher, suggests that the paralysis state puts the brain in a hypersuggestible condition where internal fears can externalize as visual and auditory hallucinations. Shane has documented several cases where individuals manage to transform their sleep paralysis episodes by changing their mindset. One such case involved a man who experienced repeated episodes of being attacked by shadowy dogs during sleep paralysis. After reading about the power of positive suggestion, he decided to try something different. The next time he found himself paralyzed, he visualized himself surrounded by a bright protective light. The dogs, which had always approached menacingly, suddenly stopped, whimpered, and then disappeared entirely. This case, and others like it, suggest that if the mind can conjure these entities, it may also have the power to banish them. However, not all sleep paralysis experiences fit neatly into this psychological framework. Some victims report that despite their attempts to confront these entities or rationalize their experiences, the episodes persist with undiminished intensity. This has led some paranormal researchers to propose that sleep paralysis might not just be a mental phenomenon, but an actual interaction with another plane of existence, a theory that has yet to be scientifically validated, but is taken seriously by those who suffer from severe and recurring episodes. In the end, whether these entities are mere figments of your mind or something far more sinister, one thing is clear: once you've encountered them, sleep will never feel safe again. Remember, sometimes the darkest nightmares don't end when you wake up.